right. Hello, everybody. Half of everybody. So glad y'all could remain with us. It's always fun to be last, especially after DAU. That good Jim from DAU, he just stands up here and talks, no notes. It's amazing to me. I'm not that good, but we may be last, but the last is the new first, right? We just thought of that a minute ago right there. So I'm going to talk today about joint standardization boards. We have three on the panel today to brief their areas. I like to say that this is really where standardization begins to be a little less boring because it's kind of where standardization meets real world operations, as you'll see. And I really think we got some cool stuff to show you. It's technical, but not too much in some ways. Real quick word about LMI. I was doing some research on one of my last pitches here years ago, and I found some documents where LMI actually did some research for standardization back in the 60s. And I thought it was the 50s, but I looked up LMI really started in 61. So LMI has been a partner with standardization for that many decades. And so we're glad to have the facility and glad to be here. So I'm Lloyd Thomas. I'm with the Defense Standardization Program Office. I work for Michael. And I want to tell you a little bit about joint standardization boards, and then we'll bring up the panel one by one to tell about their particular areas. A joint standardization board is a joint group. It's a multi-service or multi-agency membership. And they basically were formed years ago, or what began as a technical working group. And we saw this as a way to perhaps bring more participation, more problem solving as far as standardization, interoperability. And so we have a process where working groups get chartered by the Defense Standardization Executive. You may recall this morning, our keynote was Tom Sims. He is the Defense Standardization Executive of today. And so he would be authorizing charters as to recognize this technical working group as a joint standardization board. And it doesn't come with any money. Unfortunately, there's been a few things we've helped assist a little bit as far as some funding, but over the years. But generally, it's a coalition of the willing. And that actually, mostly, I would say, because we have one JSB that has taken that to a new level by codifying JSB concept inside their DoD instruction. And that's the mobile electric power folks that you'll hear from here in a minute. But DoD-wide forums, and they achieve common standardization solutions, promoting interoperability across the joint force. They identify standardization opportunities, implement standardization decisions, and advocates DSP policies, procedures, and tools. And we have a couple of JSBs that actually are huge NATO involvement. The Fuses JSB and our RSAG. RSAG is aerial refueling JSB. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the aerial refueling JSB as an add-on here just before we start with the panel, just because they couldn't make it. And I've got a few slides just to show you because I think it's kind of cool stuff. And I mean like 20 nations or more nations as part of NATO, maybe all of NATO. And even RSAG has some non-NATO coalition partners who participate in the aerial refueling business that we do. Let's see. JSB solve problems, review requirements. That's a big thing the mobile electric powered people do. They get together and talk about, what do we need in our standard catalog, standard set. We do that at ESB, the Expeditionary Shelters and Basin Equipment, JSB. What do we need in our standard catalog? What do you need in there that you'll buy and stay with the catalog? Sometimes missions don't permit the use of what's in the catalog. Sometimes there's special missions and we got to buy outside of that. And there's a waiver process to do that, especially with the mobile electric power and the expeditionary shelters, tactical shelters. And we do that. We have a process for that. But the idea is when you get on the battlefield or an FOB, you want the Army stuff working with the Air Force stuff or the Marine stuff, when things working together, whether it's tactical shelters or generators or power distribution. And that's our goal. So without further ado, if I could advance, I guess I could do that, right? One slide. I'm going to do a couple slides here on the aero refueling JSB, which is represented by the Air Refueling's Joint Standardizations Group, Joint Standardization Systems Advisory Group, excuse me. And this JSB, they've been around since 1978. This working group has been around since 1978. They were recognized in 2006 as a JSB. But they are very robust, multi-service, multi-nation. They have a chair that rotates between the Navy and the Air Force every couple of years. They're very, as you might imagine, they're air-to-air refueling, Air Force and Navy heavy. There are some Army and Marine members, though. Huge NATO membership. They have many NATO standardization agreements or STANAGs that they work on. And it's actually one of the few places you'll find Boeing and Airbus technical representatives working together at the same table with the military solving problems. And I've been to some of their meetings, and it's pretty cool. They actually have a very large annual meeting. It's very, very interesting if you ever want to see that kind of thing. Air refueling and know all about it. You should try one of those. They're usually in the spring. And I've just got a few things. This is the 7 different working groups that they have. This is, imagine like 3 different tanker aircrafts, different types of tankers produced in different eras by different manufacturers in different nations, and they all work together. They're all compatible, fully compatible. Same with the fighter aircrafts. Booms can be different size or shape. The boom diameter, nozzles, and receptacles, they're all built with the same common sets of specifications that are examined and actually shaped at this RSEC JSB. These folks get together, military, civilian, industry, and they solve the problems. They update specifications and standards and STANAGs as needed. Offload rates, delivery pressure regulation, they're all analyzed and standardized to ensure compatible interface. Aircrew procedures, whether it's the receivers and tankers, they're straight out of RSAG's latest revision of the ATP 56, now NATO document 3342. And this is basically ensures that all the air crew understand and expect the same procedures, radio calls, emergency procedures, and formations. And all that gets done at RSAG. All right, I just got some cool pictures to show you. I just think it's cool stuff. This is the EA-18G, the Growler, which is actually American carrier-based electronic warfare aircraft. It's actually a specialized version of FNA-18, a Super Hornet. And what's cool about this is it's actually standardization within the Navy. There's the same aircraft getting refueled right there. But you have this, it's one of the most advanced airborne electronic attack platforms, and it's actually built with the multi-mission capabilities that the FNA-18 is, and the commonality between the two is interchangeable. And so I just think it's a great example of how we use the same airframe, same aircraft for multiple different missions. And there's another picture, the same one. I got this down here. Oh, this is a F-22 Raptor. This jet has the radar sign of a bird. I mean, it's pretty amazing. It's Mach 1.8. You can't see it, and maybe you can't really see it in this picture, but on the dashboard are 2 flags, Australian and American flags, and that's pretty cool because the Olympics going on right now. There's a big rivalry, you know. But this is actually a U.S. Raptor being flown by an Australian Air Force flight lieutenant out over the Coral Sea, and I just thought it was neat. And here's the boom receptacle refueling. This is the primary U.S. Air Force refueling method. And then this is Navy probe drogue refueling. And this is a picture of the new KC-46 Pegasus. That is our future tanker fleet. And that is an amazing, it's so much more than a Boeing 767, which is based off of. It's multi-role, multi-compatible. It does both probe drogue and boom receptacle. It can, the Air Force should have 180 of these by the year 2027. That's the plan. It can carry cargo, people. It can be fitted out as a hospital and carry patients and a lot of fuel. And for our future, we're currently working on drone refueling, unmanned aerial refueling. And we already have right here contractor support air refueling. That's a Mega Airlines picture there. I thought that was neat. And so that's all I have for our segment. Now, let me introduce our next JSB. Okay, coming up, representing the Expeditionary Shelters and Basing Equipment Joint Standardization Board is Ms. Connie Miles Patrick. She is the team leader for the Systems Integration and Sustainment Branch, Soldier Sustainment Directorate at U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command, Soldier Center in Natick, Massachusetts. Ms. Miles Patrick's team is responsible for the research, development, and safety of shelters and shelter components in all environments, but they're focused on extreme cold conditions. Ms. Miles Patrick manages 2 congressionals that focus on the advancement of shelter materials, both rigid and soft wall, and shelter ancillary technologies with the goal to maximize operational capabilities. She's also responsible for the Shelter Transportability Certification Program. She is the action officer for the executive secretary for the ESB, or Expeditionary Shelters Basing Equipment, JSB, and has been for the past 7 years. Thank you. This JSB has over 100 volunteers from across the DoD that are experts in expeditionary shelters and basing equipment, and they meet twice per year or more as needed. Sometimes we do. And Ms. Miles Patrick holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide. I hear you. Master of Science degree in Engineering Management from Northeastern University, and Master of Science degree in Program Management from the Naval Postgraduate School. Please let me welcome Ms. Connie Miles Patrick.
Can you hear me now? You can, thank you. So first I want to thank Lloyd and Michael for allowing me to give a brief, very brief update on the Expeditionary Shelter and Basing Equipment Standardization Board. Lloyd did a great job introducing me. I had notes on who I was, so I don't have to say that now. But I've worked about over 20 years in the shelter arena in some aspect or another, as somebody said earlier today, as my day job, as an engineer, project officer, shelter integrator, shelter transportability, you name it, I've kind of done it, and I've enjoyed it. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that. And I've been involved with the Joint Committee on Tactical Shelters, and that was the name of JSB before, for about 20 years. And there's another slide that will say that we've been in existence for almost 50. You might wonder why, and not this group, but any other group might wonder, why would you need a joint standardization board on shelters? Shelters can be both rigid wall as well as soft. And the most obvious reason is because it's been around forever. And I have another slide on this too, but when it started in 1975, there was 100 different types of rigid wall shelters out there, which is a huge logistic burden, which this group would know. But now we have less than that, and so I'll go. So our main mission is to minimize the duplication of shelters that's out there, and also to advocate the standardization of tax shelters. And Lloyd also said this, it's we try to have standard shelters, we try to have standard equipment to support it, meaning ECUs or air conditioners or lighting. And sometimes the services, I don't want to say don't agree, but their needs are different. But you want to have the same connecting point, similar to what Lloyd was saying about the air refueling, so that if you're out there and you don't have the same shelter, at least you have the same adapter so that your ECUs can be fitted or be used in any of the services. You don't want to be out there and be hot when you don't have to be, or cold, or lighting's not working. So we really strive to have the standardization of different items. As Lloyd said, we have over 100 volunteers, the Coalition of the Willing, and they're basically experts from all the different services. So we have representatives from the Air Force, Navy, Air Force Marines, Air Force now, and other agencies. So I like this timeline. If you were here 2 years ago, I used it then, but I've updated it a little bit. As I stated, the Joint Committee for Tactical Shelters have been around since 1975. Am I not able? Am I not talking? Oh, okay, sorry.
No, no worries.
Okay, let's press it. Can you hear me now? Is this better? Okay, okay, thank you. You just messed up my flow. Um, so I'll show a picture in a minute, but shelters can be used for anything. Rigid wall as well as soft wall can be used for hospitals, command posts, maintenance shops. And I wasn't even around, as somebody else said. I wasn't working for the government in 1975, but I could just imagine what was out there and what they were being used for. And then the logistics burden of trying to just to replace lights or replace a boat or a lock or try to get ECUs or something to work with it. So this board was formalized. And even though soft shelters or tents have been around even longer, it really didn't join this group until 1994. We became a standardization board in 2006. And then we expanded to shelter technology. And that goes to anything from looking at the different fabrics that we might be using to insulation, core, trying to make the shelters warmer and colder. The person that talked about corrosion, when I first started in JESB or JACOTUS, that was the big speaking point was corrosion. And so they had several standards working groups that was talking about corrosion because all the different services was having that problem. Then in 2012, we expanded to contingency basing. And I asked the person that I'm here with, it's like, do you really understand what contingency basing is? Because we hear the term, but it actually stands, or what it means is any non-permanent structure that's located outside the US. So it could be a soft shelter, it could be a rigid wall. If anyone has heard of Force Provider, that's the Army's premier basing system, or with the Air Force, it's called BEAR. But it's any of those type of, actually it's a base. They put up a base to support our troops outside of the US. And so we started taking on all of the components of that as well. Then there was another group that that actually just dealt with different individual components. And so in 2018, we combined and we became the Expeditionary Shelter Basin Equipment. So we look at both rigid wall, soft wall, and all the different components with it. For example, BEAR, or the Air Force, is the only one that has, is it lights on the outside because they have the landing field. So it's part of our equipment book or our book, but they're the only one that uses it, but it's part of it. And so right now we're kind of focusing on extreme environments. So basically the Arctic, but I didn't want to just say that because if things change, we'll move to wherever our focus will be, wherever it's needed. So in our catalog, I should have brought it up here. So I'm of the mindset that I like paper, so I still carry around my old catalog that's outdated, but still up to date, that's paper. But in 2018, we went electronic. So this kind of just calls out some of our standard equipment that's in there, how many shelters we have. Shelter camouflage, which is like similar to our solar shades, but has more protection, environmental control systems, basin equipment, kitchens, latrines, and different things. And then we have different pictures. Like I said last time, I had no pictures, so pictures of some of the systems that we have in our catalog. So I wanted to also list some of the locations of our recent meetings. So we meet twice a year, normally in November and April. We used to meet in October and April, but funding issues, we normally get together, but during COVID, we actually met virtually. At NATIC or at DevCom, we also have the base camp integration lab. We call it the BSIL, now it's called the FSIL. And what's unique about having a meeting in that location is it was the picture in Lloyd's opening shot. So it's considered a lab. So half of it is control, and the other half you could have shelters and shelter technology so that you could see how well your liners are working, your solar shades are working. And it's all geared up, because I'm looking at Corey, because he probably knows it better than I do, but it's all rigged up so that you can actually have scientific information on it. So we meet at different locations because different locations can present information to the group. So we actually meet at Port Hueneme in California, and saw how their shelters are designed and how we have meetings there. We also went to Fort Wainwright right in between the pandemic. It was a short period of time that we could travel because we actually knew that we were having problems with being in Arctic conditions and our stuff freezing or not performing. We also recently met at Tyndall Air Force Base. So we had met there in 2018, right before they were hit with the hurricane. And so when we met in 2023, they wanted to show us basically the blueprint for the base of the future. If you didn't know, it's like basically their whole base was destroyed, or just about the whole base. And so they're having the base is being rebuilt, as well as they had a lot of standard as well as unstandard shelters all over the place. Weather didn't permit us to go see everything, but we had a feel for it. They actually showed a 3D printed building. So being out or being able to travel to these different locations, we're able to experience new technology, as well as understand better what our different services are doing, because not all the shelters are the same, soft or rigid. Our November meeting will be actually in Virginia, hosted by the Corps of the Marine Corps, excuse me. So we currently do not have any working groups. I'm calling them IPTs. Like I said, so we are focusing on extreme environments. So that's with the Arctic, as well as, so it's been really interesting and very good for me and very timely, because we're doing our first time actually looking at a performance spec that we need to update. I meant to state earlier that we do not have a requirement document for soft shelters. We do for rigid wall, but that doesn't mean that we still don't have requirements. So we still have the use of fabric. Fabric is still being used in contingency basing. That might not come out correctly, but we need to update it. The last time it was updated, it was in 1996. I listened to terms called digital, digital specs, so I need to find out a little bit more about that. This is definitely an older document, but we're doing it in a phased approach. So in this document, it's basically how you test different fabrics at different temperatures. So the coldest this current document goes down to is a -20. We now need to test materials down to -60. So that needs to be up there. So our first phase is basically trying to look at some of the testing procedures and making sure that it's being tested at the right requirement or temperature. The picture on top actually shows cracking. So when fabric, some of our I'm going to say older fabrics actually cracked at like -40. And so this wind whip test is a test that you can actually take the material and actually simulate being wind beaten. So that's something that would be new. And this other test is Gelbo. flex thing. So it's literally just taking the fabric and just twisting it, but we're actually doing it in a chamber at -60, about 100 times to make sure that when you take it out, that you can still use it, because that's the simulation of the tint and what it will go through. And the other thing that the other IPT that we're working on is just updating our charter and our operating procedures. It's been a little bit over 5 years, but that should have no problems. We've already met up on that about a couple of times or twice. As I stated, we were founded in 1975, so we're coming up at our 50th anniversary. So Lord, we should do something. I don't know what we should do, but we should do something. Vegas, okay, maybe, but something to celebrate that we have met for actually twice a year for 50 years, with the focus of having better shelters and shelter technology and equipment out. So where are we going from here? We're going to continue to meet. We're going to continue to meet with all our different services all over the US. Anybody has any shelters in Hawaii, I am more than willing to host a meeting there as well. Any other place. We want to continue to foster collaborations. One of the things that happened before I became the assistant to the director is that we actually had a combined commercial as well as government meeting. So we're going to talk about, see if that's possible, if we can do that again. We want to continue to promote the modernization of shelter materials, technology and systems. We want to maintain our user base and once again, update this as our first standard, but look at other standards as well. And just to provide the expertise and the guidance for environmental control units and refrigeration. So configuration issues was part of our last meeting. And so we want to kind of continue to look at that. So that is did I not? Okay. Sorry, I didn't advance the slides. So that's my update on JESB. You want to sit down and then have questions at the end?
Okay, can you hear me good? We're good? Can you? All right. So thank you very much, Connie. Our second speaker here represents the Mobile Electric Power Systems Joint Standardization Board, Mr. Corey Getz. I'm going to introduce him here. As soon as I find my glasses. I can't see. Mr. Getz is currently serving as the Chief of the Technical Management Division for Project Manager, Expeditionary Energy and Sustainment Systems, PME2S2. And that's within the Army's PE Program Executive Office for Combat Support and Combat Service Support. Mr. Getz began his career as an engineer with the Naval Sea Systems Command in the field of submarine acoustics. And then he bailed on the Navy and went to the Army, transitioned to there where he focused on tactical electrical power, sustainment systems. He also served as the Power Division Chief within SURDEC, where he oversaw the execution of power and energy research and development, ranging from soldier-borne power systems up to advanced tactical power systems. In his current role, he supports acquisition efforts to develop, procure, and field tactical power and combat support systems for warfighters. He holds a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan and a master's in national resource strategy from the National Defense University and a master's in engineering administration from Virginia Tech. Please help me welcome Mr. Getz.
Let's go ahead and use this thing. It works. Yeah, that works. Yeah.
There's the clicker right there.
Thank you very much. Now I'm on. Okay. Red, right. Red is on. Oh, you got to be close to it. Yeah, maybe I'll just use this one. Let's see if it works. I don't want to hunch over. My mom would be ashamed. All right. Is that working good? Y'all hear me? All right. Yeah. That way I can. That's okay. That's okay. I'll have my spell over it when I get done. Oh, now it's working? Okay. All right. Okay. Oh, I heard that. Okay. All right. So thanks everyone. Is it working? Okay. It's coming and going. Oh, it's got to be close. Okay. I appreciate that. It's good delay too. Oh boy, that's a big help. Okay. So thank you. Hey, before I get started, I got here a little late and I'm sorry about that. But I heard someone got $5,000 today. I think about all the conferences I've been to. Nothing comes close to that. So that's awesome. Congratulations to whoever did that. That's amazing. So I'm Core Getz. So I work for E2S2. We say E2S2 because Expeditionary Energy and Sustainment Systems is a whole lot of mouthful. But E2S2, as Lloyd said, tactical power and sustainment systems. So I'm going to focus on the tactical power side. Our sustainment systems are a big part of what Connie does within her Joint Standardization Board. And it was modeled somewhat after kind of what we do in power. And as they're trying to stand up charters, or a charter. Power is a pretty good model. It's been around for quite a while, but I'll talk to that. Next slide, please. Oh, I have that. Gosh, dang it. Well, you have the video control, right? So I've got a little video here. This is a bit of a historical artifact. And I know some of you have seen it, but I feel it gets better each time. So
is a report of men whose job is to keep them running. Starting in 1941, the U.S. Armed Forces had to quickly match and surpass a well-equipped and highly mechanized enemy. By 1944, over 325 makes and models of industrial engines were drafted to meet the emergency. In this anti-aircraft battery, the director, tracker, radar, and the guns were powered by a generator and one of these 325 engines. An engine that G.I. Joe kept running.
I'll call maintenance. They'll get it running. It won't take long to fix if they have the right parts.
Joe, your engine ran again, and those guns went back into action. But it took longer than you thought it should, didn't it? Let's find out why it took so long. First, the parts had to be identified, and that often meant searching through many catalogs. Requisitions had to be processed, and the parts had to be located. In many overseas depots, there were more parts than bin space. So they had to look through expedient bins and shipping cases. There were thousands like you, Joe, all waiting for different parts needed for different engines. On top of all these were shortages, enemy action, and accidents, resulting in equipment idle, deadline, because some small part peculiar was not available. This often caused dependent equipment to become inactive. Operations delayed, lives lost.
thank you. So Lloyd said you got to get a new movie. But the whole point of that is it's a historical artifact, right? It points to a problem in what I would argue was our last near-peer conflict, right? We rushed to equip, just like we're doing now. We pushed things out. We wanted to be accelerated. We needed a volume of stuff out there. And then we saw the problems, right? So we know what the results are. And if we can use standardization to get ahead of it before that happens, that's kind of our goal. I would say the other thing that's called out about that to me is there's no real fundamental difference on how we're going to sustain large-scale combat operations from World War II to now. Sure, you might fly it out there with a drone, but you have to get the stuff there, and the soldiers have to be able to fix it themselves. we can't rely on the contractors that we've had on the battlefield for 2 decades to do that when we're talking about the type of conflict that we're all spending a lot of modernization dollars to prepare for. So, we came out of World War II. Within about 6 months, there was a memo that came out that said, you got to fix this problem. That's pretty fast for DoD standards. I mean, it was the War Department, but still pretty fast. So they recognized the problem quickly and decided they want to get after it. So they had a policy, and R&D and things like that were brought together under the Army to help the War Department. Fast forward to the Vietnam conflict, same problem. So we've heard numbers of up to 2,000 different makes and models of generators, up from the problem that they had seen in World War II. So they said, we really have to get after it in a real way. And they stood up a material developer to do that, to say, let's actually build the standard stuff so that it's not just an R&D policy and it's not just an administrative policy, it'll get out there. And so in 1967, the DoD D 4120.11 was stood up. That's still a valid document. So that's morphed into a DoDI, but its last update was 2018. So still relevant, and it's still what guides my organization's mission today. We've got a lot to manage here. So I think the key thing about our policy is it aligns to people, right? So you've got the formal link between the DoDI 4120.11 and our JSB. It's called out and recognized as the forum to do the coordination between the services. It also identifies the Army as a lead standardization activity. I think that's one thing that's tougher with shelters is you gotta committee that. But at the end of the day, our true influence is not with a policy. We can't just beat people over the head with a policy because they'll stop coming around. And I think our office was actually in the past kind of known for that, right? And if you're a roadblock in standardization, forget it. People will get around that roadblock. So I think the other thing it does, if you're a PM out there and you're saying, do I want to get into this? It does give us a little bit of top cover when it comes to funding and contracts, because one of our responsibilities is have contracts available for all the services. And so it is a responsibility that is delegated to Army. The Army does take that responsibility seriously when budgets are good. No, I didn't say that. But no, it is something that it's another argument we can say, look, we need to keep these contracts open at least at my minimum sustainability rates. Okay, so I call this the Home Depot chart because a lot of times we hear, why can't I just go buy my generators at Home Depot? For one, because you can't go buy these generators at Home Depot that do any of the things we need them to do. I'm not going to go too deep technically, but you see that chart over there kind of gives an indication of where commercial generators are designed to operate with temperature and elevation. And then all that extra stuff in the green are things that our generators need to do, and you will not find on the commercial market. We've a couple times been driven externally to go and do research on what kind of commercial sets could we buy and then make ready. And at the end of the day, you have something that costs a little more than our generator sets. What I want to focus on in this is sort of the what's in it for me. Right, because a lot of times standardization is seen as something that's difficult or expensive or stifles innovation. And I don't think it's that at all. And what we say is for the Army, it reduces life cycle cost. All of the contracted logistics doesn't have to be there. And you get better interoperability. What's in it for the soldier, right? So you get systems designed to perform in extreme environments with proven reliability. And that whole part about getting them up and running faster and cheaper, that still stands true today. And then for the PMs, which let's be frank, when non-standard things get into the field, it's the PMs putting them out there. It's my crowd. And so what we say to them is, look, it's already tested for all the applications that you've got for it. It's provisioned, supported, and schoolhouse trained, so you don't have to spend your time and dollars doing that. And if you ask for it through the right channels, it's free, right? And free is a big, you're going to go pay $5 for a beer or go to the guy that says he has free beer, right? So that can be a big selling point. And I think it starts to get into a theme that I have that is, standardization is more about carrots than sticks. So what does our MEPS JSB do? Well, let me just say, we pick a fixed date. So it's the fourth Tuesday of every April and October. We've had about 20 since we restarted them about 10 years ago. And I think we did all through the pandemic. I don't think we missed any. We went to virtual immediately. And we generally have about 150 people join those. So we have good interest from our service partners, excellent support from our OSD partners, and we have really good, I think, relevant conversations and relevant updates that keep people coming back. It's very important, I think, if you want to do a JSB, to have someone assigned to bird dog it, right? So I've got John Spiller. John can bird dog people, right? So keeping people focused. Connie can bird dog people too. And it's important to keep people actively responsible for what they owe the group, and then everyone gets what they need out of it. The delegated authority to the service leads that we have is key. So we don't try to dictate what all the services do. We have our policy and we try to bring them to us. They are responsible for their own power systems if they need something special. If they're doing their own R&D, we try to keep track of it in case it serves other people. But we try to delegate some of those authorities out. I would say also that it gives good communication channels. Our meetings are every 6 months, but that's not where the work happens. The work happens between, and we've seen some fantastically challenging problems fixed through the open communication channels established through our JSB. And you see that tagline there again in the theme. They have to see it as value added or they'll stop coming. So one of the ways ahead that we're trying to take care of within the Army, when we talk about standardization, I talk about you got to make it useful for people. You do need the policies in place as top cover, but people have to be aware of it, so that's the problem with what we do. We'll cold call people who are in the beginning stages of their program, and you never know what you'll get. But a lot of times it's, I didn't know you guys existed. I'm so glad you're here and you can help me out. You hit us at the right time. If you hit them too late, there's not a lot you can do. But we've had good response from folks when we hit them at the wrong time. But it's hard for us to know the people we need to reach out to. So we're looking at establishing a liaison officer within our requirements community. The Army has delegated authorities and decentralized authorities so much that within acquisition, it's hard to find that one point where you can talk to everyone. We have an entry gate process for requirements, and it is I call it a bottleneck, and that sounds pejorative, but I mean it in a good way, right? You can touch every program as it emerges. And so we want to get someone into there to help the capability developers understand power needs. And with that, we can establish relationships with material developers that are assigned as offices of primary responsibility for that. So it helps us get in early and establish those ties within our own community. Here's some references if you want to read those references. But I'll say again, like standardization is about carrots. If it's about sticks, you can make it longer and longer and they'll wander around it. You really have to bring them in and make them understand why it's good for them and their user. That's all I have.
Okay, so thank you very much, Corey. I just wanted to mention, I meant to mention this a little earlier. We have a section on our website where we show our joint standardization boards, some information, some charters, and there's some links there. One link we have is the actual catalog for tactical shelters and basing equipment from the ESB JSP management. And we're offering to do the same thing for the MEPS products. And so we're going to get together and hopefully we'll have that up there. So just want to put that out there. Maybe that'll help bring up about more awareness and then more interest. Did you say something about free beer?
Yeah, I said so.
Oh, yeah. So see that my mind just trails off sometimes on these other things. Yeah, right. But MEPS, the mobile electric power folks, they have teams of people that actually deploy and actually go out there around the world and help units with their power. And that's pretty amazing to me. I mean, that's real world ops stuff. And they do a great annual report and submit it up through OSD. Very interesting stuff. I love it. So thank you for that. Okay, so for our third and final Joint Standardization Board, let me introduce Ms. Sandy Picnic of the Fuse Initiation Systems JSB. This Joint Standardization Board is represented by the Fuse Engineering Standardization Working Group. We call the Fuses JSB. Ms. Picnic is an area manager in the Army Fuse Management Office at the Army Combat Capabilities Development Command, Armament Center, and that's at Picatinny Arsenal, New Jersey. Ms. Picnic's government service began at the Picatinny Arsenal in 2004, working in the System Safety Office, where she spent approximately 9 years. And she continued her career with an assignment in the Office of the Director of Technology, which executes the Armament Center Science and Technology portfolio. In 2013, Ms. Picnic has worked, or since 2013, Ms. Picnic has worked in the Army Fuse Management Office, serving as the Army Fuse Safety Review Board Executive Secretary and the Army Technical Advisor to the Joint Standardization Board for Fuse Initiation Systems. Ms. Picnic has a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering and a Master of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering, both from the Stevens Institute of Technology. Please help me welcome Ms. Sandy Picnic.
I have both on. I have both the lapel and the mic. If I just do the mic, is that better for you guys? Yes, I got a thumbs up. So thank you for that. So good afternoon, everyone. Good news is I am your last briefer. Bad news is there is no free beer. So with that, I'll proceed. So Lori, thank you for the lovely introduction. For this afternoon, I'm going to go through the agenda. I'm going to go through the Joint Standardization Board for Fuse and Initiation System, our mission, our significant milestones, and there are many, our membership. We'll also go over the program of work, both on the DoD level as well as on the NATO side. And then we'll do a quick summary and takeaways from the board. Formally chartered, we are a Joint Standardization Board for Fuse and Initiation Systems. It's represented by the DoD Fuse Engineering Standardization Working Group, and we are officially chartered with a purpose to maintain a DoD-wide arrangement for standardization for both U.S. and NATO standards related to fuses and initiation systems that are used or employed in munitions across the DoD, as well as in our NATO community. We have been serving as a continuing group to help facilitate standardization of fuses and initiation systems, inclusive of design concepts, testing, evaluation, and involving technologies, including packaging, logistic techniques, testing and evaluation procedures, all along with a primary emphasis on two components: design safety and interoperability. If we go through a quick DoD FESWIC overview, our significant milestones, we have been well in over operations for over 50 years. We were formally chartered under DSP back in 2003. And in 2006, we formally were chartered as a joint standardization board. Currently our charter is in staffing and has been updated. So that is currently in process. And our 109th meeting is scheduled for this November. So we have been in operation for well over 50 years, and it's been well represented. So our FESWIC membership is well diverse. It is chartered by the office that I currently work in the Army Fuse Management Office, but our membership also includes our executive secretary, and it's well represented by our tri-service members, as well as our national labs. And we also invite subject matter experts from industry and academia when we need to reach out for such specialties and subject matter experts. We serve as both the U.S. body for fusion initiation systems. We are the focal point for both the DoD documents as well as support for NATO documents. And our meetings, generally, we hold 2 formal a year, but we've had plenty of ad hoc meetings, both in person as well virtual and remote. So just to take a step back on what fuse and initiation systems are, and the simplest way I can explain it is that they're across every DoD munition. So you can see here in my photos, they're well represented in any mortar application, rocket launches, drop bomb scenarios, and Navy assets as well. And these are critical technologies that really provide safety, effectiveness, and versatility in operational effectiveness. So going down a little bit further on what are fuse and initiation systems. So a fuse or a fuse system is a physical system that's designed to sense a target or a pre-described condition, which really is intended to initiate that explosive train or that payload in the munition. An initiation system is closely tied to a fuse system, but its intent is to initiate explosive train for propulsion, such as rocket motors and whatnot. So how does this joint standardization board operate, and who are the players, and how it's organized between both the DoD and on the NATO side? So you can see on your left here, the DoD US element is well represented by the DoD FESWIC group. It is chaired by the Army Fuse Management Office, and it's well supported by all 3 services and other guests and other government agencies. On the right-hand side is what you'll see for the NATO support. It is represented by the AC-326 subgroup A group. But the key focal point here is that both elements are chaired oversight by the Army Fuse Management Office. And that membership for that group is well represented by our NATO nations, our partners for peace nations, and other NATO affiliated nations. Just a little background on Army Fuse Management Office and our mission and why it's so important and our role for standardization and involvement with the Joint Standardization Board is our quote is where everything fuses, right? So we provide central management oversight for all Army's non-nuclear fuses throughout its life cycle. And when you see on this chart, we have 3 essentially pillars of what constitutes our mission set. On the left-hand side is what we like to call our fuse technology and our industrial base. So this particular column enforces our early involvement with emerging technologies, industry needs, and partners in the health of our industrial base. Our center focal column point is our standardization efforts. We are, because of our involvement with early emerging technologies and with industries, we get the preview of what might be coming down so we can adjust fires and adjust our standardization efforts. Our last column, our last pillar, is the fact that we chair the independent fuse safety review boards. And so what that provides us is the fact that we now have our standardization documents that defines our design safety standards. Here is the column where we get to execute that and ensure that industry partners who are coming before the independent review boards for compliance and assessment, we get to recognize where we can improve and strengthen our standardization so that industry is well prepared. So all these three different columns are all interconnected, and the bottom line is that our mission set is focal for standardization. So in this chart, this is a quick summary of just our highlights of what positive activities we have been doing. So we are continuously evaluating our standardization documents, continuously updating our existing ones and addressing new documents based on new emerging technologies. We have constant interactions with our industry partners, one of which we have an upcoming fuse conference with industry, where two of the briefings will be talking about standardization related efforts. And one of the most recent accomplishments is our publication of a recent document that we completed back in January of 2023. So these are really our kind of key takeaways and kind of our quick summaries on how involved we are within this community. Here is a quick summary of the status of our fuse and initiation system standards. This is our quick list of DoD standards related to fuse and initiation. I won't go through the complete list, but you can see there are many involved. Equivalent to our DoD standards, we have our joint ordnance test procedure venue. So we are also quickly filling up that list of documents. We'll go through that I'll go through some of the key highlights and some of those standards that we've been actively pursuing. But the focus for this, I just wanted to highlight and not get too technical, but get into kind of the focal point of a lot of these documents that are being worked within the community. The first set between MIL Standard 331 and JOTP 052, these are the two documents that are most closely related. MIL Standard 331 provides the cookbook recipe of all our test procedures that are required for safety and reliability. JOTP 052 actually identifies your proposed fuse qualification test plan, fuse and initiation systems qualification test plan. And these two are very succinct. So if there are updates or changes proposed to one, the alternate is usually updated as well. So the point is, as a community, we are ensuring that both are succinct and updated accordingly. If you were to ask this joint standardization board which two standards of the complete list I showed before were the key, these are the two. So we have MIL Standard 1901. That is our design safety requirements for initiation systems. That one currently is having a major revision update. The other one is MIL Standard 1316. That is our design safety requirements for fuse systems. And that is following suit with changes that are occurring from 1901 that could be easily carried over and transitioned. So both of those are, they're closely tied and ensuring that we have commonality and consistency where feasible. So JOTP 056, this is one of the ones that I'm most excited about. Don't want to get too technical into it, but there's a lot of excitement around the new qualification testing we're going after for new initiators, addressing new technologies and capabilities. And as I mentioned before, this is one of the ones that we'll be briefing out at the industry fuse conference to inform industry of the JSB's intent and our pathway forward for this particular qualification test program for initiators. The other JOTP that's currently in work, another exciting document, very relevant to today's world, is JOTP 057. This addresses safety design requirements for fuse systems that are employed on UAVs. So we're seeing that a lot. And what this really goes after is addressing how we can safely recover a UAV asset containing a warhead or explosive payload. Another JOTP that's currently in work is addressing the requirements and guidelines for fault tree analysis, which is one of our key safety analysis tools that we rely upon and utilize for analysis. So that is also currently in work. As I mentioned before, JOTP 055, that was one of the more recent JOTPs that was published back in January of 2023. Last 2 years ago when I had presented, this was currently in review by the working group. So this standard, what this actually does is provides clarification and design and criteria requirements for OSD's policy on cluster munitions. So OSD came out with policy back in 2017 about guidelines for DoD acquiring cluster munitions. They had to meet 3 specific criteria, one of which was around some munition advanced features. The concerning part was it didn't translate neatly into design safety requirements or design requirements around the fusing. So with permission from OSD, the community then went after and developed this document, which was then heavily reviewed and ultimately ratified back in January 2023, which is also available publicly on DoD Assist, by the way. Currently, we have a couple other standards in queue as well, but the one that's currently on hold is a directed energies weapon for fuse safety design criteria. It's currently on hold. We're waiting for the Joint Weapons Safety Working Group to provide a formal tasker, as well as we're also strategizing that most of the requirements are probably going to be leveraged from our MIL standard 1901B that's in work. So we're patiently waiting for both those two to then flip the switch and start actively engaging in this new potential document. So the next portion is related to the NATO AC 326 subgroup A initiatives. So from those that are not familiar, from a NATO standardization perspective, this group lives under the NAC, under the CNAD for Conference of National Armament Directors. It's split under the AC 326, and we're actually under the subgroup A for fusion initiation systems. There's a co-chair arrangement. So the one portion for the energetic materials is actually chaired by Turkey, whereas for the initiation systems portion, it's chaired by Army Fuse Management Office. And the group meets twice a year, and they've been having ad hoc remote telecons when necessary. Just to remind folks on the NATO document structure, we have our covering documents from StanX to StanRex. We have the allied standards and standard related documents. So these are the NATO document structure outline. And really the AC 326, the CAT-J standardization, its objectives is really in support of NATO deployed missions and operations, and they take a little bit more of a holistic view and application for the complete munition life cycle. So they start with improving interoperability and interchangeability, and agree upon commonly agreed requirements such as safety, assessment, evaluation, and catalog. They also introduce safe and reliable munitions into the service. They give guidance and specifications to munition designs, as well as giving rules and recommendations to logistics. What's key is, and I won't go through this chart completely, but what's really the key takeaway on this is the fact that there's a direct link between the NATO standards and the DoD standards, and that shouldn't be overlooked because this community has made a diligent effort in ensuring that there is commonality and we can crosswalk between NATO standards and our DoD standards equivalently. And in some cases, there are no NATO standards currently, but that is only because driven for either unique U.S. requirements or policies and whatnot. Just as a reminder, in terms of what the NATO subgroup A has been doing in terms of program of work, they've been actively, proactively getting their documents and accomplishments from their current work status. So there is a laundry list of ones that are currently in work, currently in ratification. But the point is the next upcoming meeting is scheduled for mid-September in Bergen, Norway. The program of work is reviewed and approved yearly by the CASC, and all three subgroups that do report up to provide their reports of progress to this overarching group. And so the key takeaways, and I just want to remind folks in terms of the Joint Standardization Board, it's chaired and managed by Army Fuse Management Office to ensure both on the DoD side and on the NATO side, there's consistency. We have been a very active Joint Standardization Board, and it's been a well supported working group where we have all tri-service members. And as Mr. Sims had mentioned earlier, technology sometimes leads in terms of standards. And from this board's perspective, we're trying to really close the gap on that technology versus standards. So we're very proactive in going after emerging technologies, new challenges, and requirements that's facing our standards, because we use those to effectively evaluate our designs. So with that, that concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, free beer. Thanks.
Actually, I was going to open it up to the floor. If there are any questions for any of us, we have a few minutes. Happy to take them. And if not, somewhere there's beer. Embassy Suites, do they have free beer? Anyway, I did want to point out one quick thing, Michael, if you'll let me. I don't know if anybody picked up the Achievement Awards brochure on the table back there, but they'll be there all week. It's interesting to me that if you look at our purpose, mission, and vision is on the back for the DSP at large for all of us. The mission talks about promoting interoperability, and the vision talks about joint interoperability. And when I look at JSBs, to me, a big word for me is interoperability. And so I think we'll do a good job. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.